Protesters are back on the streets of Myanmar a day after security forces stepped up the use of force to disperse crowds. A teenager remains in critical condition after reportedly being shot in the head in Naypyidaw. At the same time, some police and government staffers have been reported joining the protesters.
These protesters are not backing down. A day after facing off with riot police armed with tear gas, rubber bullets and water cannon, massive crowds have returned to the streets. From Yangon to Mandalay, tens of thousands of people are making their opposition to the coup known. In Naypyidaw, hundreds of government workers marched in support, while there are reports of police joining protests in the east.
ညီမတို့ကဆိုရင် generation set လေးဖြစ်တော့ပထမဆုံးအနေနဲ့မဲပေးခဲ့ရတဲ့လူတွေဖြစ်ပါတယ်ညီမတို့ဘောမှာပထမဆုံးမဲပေးခဲ့ရခြင်းပေါ့နော်ဒီလိုမဲပေးခဲ့ရခြင်းရဲ့ vote တွေကိုမတရားပါဘူးလို့ဆိုပြီးတော့ဒီယူဆသွားပြီးတော့ခါကြတော့ဒီလိုမျိုးမတရားလုပ်မှုဟာလည်းခံရတဲ့အတွက်မလို့ညီမတို့ရဲ့ဘဝမှာလည်းဒါပထမဆုံး protest ပေါ့နော်ဆန္ဒပြရခြင်းလေးဖြစ်ပါတယ်ဆိုတော့ညီမတို့ဒါမျိုးပထမဆုံးလေးကိုတော့မလို့ချင်ဘူးပေါ့နော်ဒီလားအဲဒီအတွက်ကြောင့်မလို့ညီမတို့ရဲ့ leaders တွေကိုလည်းအမြဲတမ်းလွတ်ပေးပြီးတော့ခါကြတော့ညီမတို့ရဲ့ဒီ The
military government has responded by imposing restrictions on gatherings and a night curfew in big cities. Soldiers also raided and ransacked the headquarters of Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD party. Reports say dozens more politicians were detained. State media has also taken aim at protesters, calling the crowd out for using obscene language and injuring police. It's the first direct mention of the protests since they began last weekend.
Young Waikit joins us live with the latest. Waikit, there's been a lot of attention, social media focus as well on the girl who was shot in the head. Can you tell us more?
Well, right now, the girl is still in critical condition. We reached out to the doctor who is treating her in Naypyidaw, and she told us she's on ventilator. Other doctors who are in the same surgical department as that doctor have shared with us images of CT scans, which is also made available to other local reporters. I took those CT scans and verified with healthcare professionals independently, and they say that they can see from the CT scan at least a crack line on the skull, but there's not much else they can tell me because the quality of the CT scan, as they say, is not very good. This, of course, has sparked a lot of concern and outrage online, as you've said earlier, Steve. Local media say that police had shot her in the head while she was in a demonstration in Naypyidaw yesterday.
Waikit, both sides are not backing down, as we've seen the images earlier. How's the situation likely to evolve?
Well, that would depend on various factors. One, the internet. As you've seen earlier, one of the interviewers at the protest say that they are Generation Z, which means to say they are very good at using the internet. And this is a very key point here, because if you look back at 1988 and 1962, there was no internet, and it took the authorities just 1 or 2 days before they took action, and there were mass casualties, at least 1,000 in the first few days of those protests. Right now, it's a different generation of protests. People are able to live stream what's happening in protest sites. Journalists are tweeting furiously, and the world is watching. So the internet is going to be one big factor to determine just how or if there will be any further violent crackdown. The other event they were keeping a very close watch on would be next week, and that's when ousted leaders Aung San Suu Kyi and Win Myint would appear in court again to hear their charges. Very likely events surrounding those days are likely going to spur some emotion among protesters, who may in turn result in the authorities retaliating with more force. And between now and then, we'll have to take note of unpredictable or surprise factors, such as if there are more casualties resulting from use of force by the authorities, or if there are fatalities that could also spur more violence, as well as perhaps more violent crackdowns.